And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at the second summoners for the Vanguard and the Fallen Kingdoms for Summoner Wars. Now, Summoner Wars is a game in which players are each have a summoner and summon units and fight each other. I've done many reviews on it. These second summoners, there was already a first summoner. These allow you to basically replace your first summoner with a new one. They come with a whole new set of magic or event cards that you can use, and then common units. So you basically have a whole army in these packs, although you can mix and match with the previous ones and with the reinforcement packs. They do give a very different feeling. Let's take a look at them and see how each of the armies plays a little. So let's take a look at the Vanguards first. Here we have the Summoner, and basically this Summoner, any common unit that's within 2 spaces of him only gets a wound on a 4, 5, or 6. This is a really big deal because allowing him to be near others, he has a very strong defensive bonus, and he can actually do this for himself. He gets +2 attack value, and then his whole army basically for 1 turn only takes it. So he's a very strong defensive person. He has, as one of his folks here, one of the commons, and I guess you can add them to the original summoner too, are these swift maneuvers, but they work much better with him. Basically, when someone attacks him and they don't wound these guys, they can switch places with someone. So they have very high maneuverability, and then you can also he can pull them from your opponent's discard pile. So you can run these guys up. Who cares if you kill them? I'll pull them back and be able to use them again. And then this champion here allows Woeful Brothers to have the bow symbol. And you can see that anybody who has 2 with a bow symbol and 2 hit points and only costs 2, very useful, which makes this champion really good. Hopefully that you can get him out on the table. Warrior Angels, they're very generic units, basically. They can fly. They're very neat. I really like the Honor Guard. Basically, the Honor Guard starts next to a champion or summoner, and when they move, you can then move them adjacent to the targeted unit. So this guy starts next to a summoner, for example. Summoner moves, and then this guy goes adjacent to that summoner, which actually lets him move really far if you could pull it off or move him into places that you normally couldn't get him. A very useful guy. Again, adding to the defensive value of this army. Here you can ignore wound markers for a common unit. Not that great of a thing, although you can put some of the more strong mercenary units in this and then use Divine Protection on them. This is a card that I've wanted in Summoner Wars for a really long time, and that's the Abolish thing. Basically here, I can cancel an opponent's event card. That's awesome. That's neat. And that's going to make them, I think people might use the summoners just for this. And then a couple more champions here. She is basically the champion of shielding. Look at that, 9 hit points. Very expensive to get on the board. And you must attack her if you're next to her as the enemy. So she can go up in there and basically guard the summoner. And then one of the coolest champions in the game, super powerful, Sybil Swancott here. An old lady, only 3 hit points, but she's 4 and a bow. That is rocking. Not only that, whenever she takes wounds, you roll the die, and on a 4 or higher, that wound doesn't count against her. So she's still pretty fragile. I mean, if you think about that, there's not a huge difference between having that ability and 3 wounds and then just having 6 wounds. It's almost essentially the same, but still, 4 and a bow and that combined is pretty cool. Going from the defensive Vanguards, now we go to the evil Fallen Kingdom. Matt Syrian here has a 2 bow attack, pretty good attack to start with, but whenever he does a wound on someone, he can remove a wound marker from himself. Kind of almost like a vampire type ability. And that's really important because he takes wounds easily. I can put a wound on him to draw 5 cards and summon people during the event phase. That's pretty cool. He can reanimate someone. I can put 2 wounds on him and put out common units from the discard pile. So very powerful, neat ability, but you got to be careful with him because it's so easy to put wounds on him, and the only way to get him off is for him to attack other people, which of course probably puts him in more danger. He can summon these warlocks, which are pretty expensive. They're 3, but they are 2 bows, and with 2 hit points. But he can summon them for a wound marker instead. So you're tempted to constantly be putting wounds on the guy to do all these things. You know, how useful is that? And even this guy, I love this guy, Gul'das. He's 4. It's very powerful and has 7 hit points. He can run up and just nail someone. However, if he does 3 or more wounds, your summoner takes a wound marker. So that's... You got to be careful. You almost want him just to do 2 wounds. But with 4 dice, the chance of doing 3 wounds is quite possible. So, but he's really cheap to get out on the board, only 5. So it's kind of a mismatch. Then we have ghouls. Ghouls are pretty powerful, you know, straight up guys, except that if they don't kill someone, they take a wound. So you have to be careful with them. They die pretty fast. And you can even give that ravenous hunger to everybody with the forbidden ritual. Then you have vampires, which are fairly weak, only 1 hit point, but they can move 2 spaces after attacking someone. They turn into a bat, basically, giving them very high maneuverability, and you can get them around and attack your opponent's summoner pretty quickly if they survive. Then this champion here is really neat. I really like the fact that your opponents must add 2 to the summon cost of all their champion units. The problem with him is you want him out at the beginning of the game. If you draw him near the end, it doesn't matter if your opponent's already got 2 of their champions out. Now, if you're playing the Vanguards, if you notice those Vanguards had a summon cost of 8, making that 10 is almost impossible to get them out. So he's cool for that. And then this nasty, ugly, gross corpse worm, 9 hit points, only 1 attack, but it's essentially a mobile wall. Because when you summon units, they can go next to this thing. So he can just walk up to the enemy, hopefully take a decent amount of hits, dropping guys as you can. So that's pretty cool. Now, of course, you have your 2 opposites here. These are actually fun to play against each other. The Vanguards of life, and then the Fallen Kingdom of death. Really the opposites. But this specific summoner, the Vanguards, is all about the defensive, the shielding, blocking what your opponent does. While this Fallen Kingdom, this guy here may be the hardest summoner in the game to play. I'm thinking that. Because I think what he has some really powerful abilities, but the fact that he has to take wounds to do these is so very dangerous, and your opponent can take advantage of that. If you're down to a few wounds, sure, you can have ways to get those wounds off you, but they can come in and finish you off. Now, his advantage is, hopefully, if he takes some wounds at the beginning, he can get a whole pile of strong people out on the board and go and attack your opponent and take care of them. And he has some pretty cool champions, although the Vanguard champions are some of the coolest ones I've ever seen. It's really interesting. So this is not one, if you're new to the game, I would not get this. But if you're in the game, this will give you a very different feeling than any of the other summoners. And again, that's one of the cool things about Summoner Wars is how different the armies feel, and yet perfectly balanced. The Vanguards, this one is on the opposite extreme. This is a good one for new players because it's so defensive. You want to sit there and march with like shields and take as few wounds as possible. This is what you want. Here you take a lot of wounds on purpose. Hopefully you can kill your opponent's summoner before dying. This is a quick, fast strike deck, I think, because you can't fool around very long or you're going to die, while this one can hold out for a very long period of time. It's interesting, again, to see them go up against each other, but 2 very solid entries. I still love this game. Great game. Great game.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.